Lion in the Wind. Chapter 11. Elgar strode into Black's office and found him busily working at his computer. "Morning, Elgar. Anything interesting today?" asked Black without taking his attention away from his computer. "War started," said Elgar flatly. Black looked up and grinned. "Yes, I saw that. Any word on the progress of the fighting so far?" The Gorg's initial attack stalled out shortly after it started. The Yigsen have taken that opportunity and fallen back to their second defensive line. Black grinned devilishly. Sounds exciting. And what is the status of our favorite cybernetic lion? Did our men ensure that he made it through the initial fighting? We don't know. The field team who was monitoring him was killed in the bombardment that preceded the initial attack. I have several other teams in the area watching for any traces of him. But so far they haven't seen any signs that he's still functional. Black growled in frustration. Please ensure that they find him, and soon. We're making every effort to do so. You had better. I can't afford to lose him this early in the game. I prefer to keep my pawns alive and healthy until they're no longer needed. Elgar nodded. Understood. Welk raised his binoculars and studied the front lines. He watched as the Gorg commanders worked hard to rally their men in an effort to get the assault moving again. But, despite their best efforts, their troops were hesitant to advance. "Do you see him?" asked Sims. "No, I don't," grumbled Welk. He continued scanning the area for several minutes, but saw nothing. However, just when he was about to give up, he spotted something. A red, gold and gray-colored splotch moved discreetly across the ground as it shifted from one patch of grass to another. "Ah! There he is. Just to the right of that truck over there," said Welk. Sims panned his binoculars around until he saw it too. "What's he doing?" he asked. "I think he's stalking those soldiers down there, and waiting for the right moment to attack," said Welk. "So what do we do?" asked Sims. "We stop him before he gets himself killed," said Welk as he tapped his transmitter. "Tegani, this is Welk. Please respond." Static. "Tegani, I know you can hear me. Please respond." More static. Welk grunted angrily. "Stop pretending that you can't hear me, because I know you can." The two men then heard their headphones crackle to life. "I hear you," came the reply. "What are you doing?" asked Welk. "Trying to find the enemy soldiers who killed my friend." The two men looked at each other in surprise. "Tegani, there's no way you can tell who shot Dusty," said Sims. "Yes there is. The odor of their rifles was all over his body. I'll know it when I smell it." "Don't do it. You'll get yourself killed," said Welk as he raised his glasses. Silence. "Tegani, you need to retreat immediately. There will be plenty of opportunities to avenge his death later on. But right now is not the time. I will not leave until the men responsible for Dusty's death are punished." "They will, Tegani. Listen to me. I know this sounds strange, but right now you're having an emotional reaction, which is preventing you from thinking straight. I am a machine. Machines don't have emotions. It's impossible." "No, it's very possible, and I think you're handling this rather poorly. You're feeling anger and sadness at the loss of your friend, and regret that you couldn't do more to save him. That's making you act illogically. Don't you see? Revenge is not the answer." "At least not yet," said Welk. They listened for several moments for Tegani to respond, but heard nothing. "Tegani, it's not your fault Dusty died. You did all that you could. The actions of both of you saved a lot of lives today. But many more died," said Tegani. "He's moving," said Sims as he watched Tegani through his binoculars. "That's war, Tegani. People die. There's nothing you or I can do to change that. I understand this. But I swore to my father that I would protect every one of you with my life. I have failed at that mission. Therefore, the only path left to me now is to punish those who killed my friend, and avenge his death. Listen, Tegani. Your father was right. You do need to protect us. But how will you do that if you're dead? Tegani stopped. Come back with us and we'll work together to protect as many people as we can. Welk listened to the radio as static crackled in his ear, but no reply came. You can't protect everyone, Tegani. It's not physically possible. However, you can protect some of them. But only if you're alive. Now come back to me. Once again he heard only silence. Just then Sims perked up. He's moving again. Wait, he's turning around and coming back this way, he said. Welk raised his binoculars and watched as Tegani slipped cautiously through the carnage near the old defensive line and made his way back towards them. That a boy, Tegani. We'll meet you on the road at the top of the hill. Several minutes later Tegani appeared on the road leading towards the rear lines. He soon spotted Welk and Sims squatting in the brush by the roadside and made his way over to them. I have returned as you've requested, he said. Welk studied him with interest. Looks like we'll need to give you a bath when we get a chance, he said. I can tend to my own hygienic needs, said Tegani. Welk grinned. Consider it a favor from one friend to another. Tegani thought about this briefly and then nodded. Yes, you are my friend. But come, we must move quickly. The Gorg will soon be on the move again, so we are not safe here. They then turned and soon caught up with the other men of their squad, and then quickly made their way over to a rally camp position just behind the second defensive line. Off on the eastern horizon smoke and fire filled the air as the Yigzin waged a desperate battle to hold the Gorg advance in check. Overhead, Yigzin and Gorg fighters dueled bitterly for control of the skies. As Tegani watched this unfold above him, the men in his squad each took turns washing the thick layers of blood and dirt from his fur. One of the soldiers, while picking at a gash in his false skin, took note of a small scuff in his metal body armor which showed through the tear. You've got a tough skull there, my friend, said the soldier. The metal is an alloy my father created. While not impenetrable, it will easily deflect most small arms fire, said Tegani. Another of the soldiers chuckled, and said, it's a good thing too. We wouldn't want a Gorg to put a bullet through your skull and smash that amazing brain of yours. Tegani shook his head. My brain, as you would call it, is not contained within my head. My primary neural core is located in my chest within a specially armored housing. My head is merely an instrument pack. It contains the sensor equipment for all 5 of my primary senses, as well as a variety of other secondary sensory instrumentation. Loss if it would merely inconvenience me, but not kill me. That's good to know, chuckled Sims. The soldier, who was washing his back, picked at a loose section of skin, and said, looks like we're going to need to get you a new coat. That won't be necessary. My automatic maintenance systems are already making the necessary repairs to my overskin. It should be fully restored by tomorrow morning, said Tegani. Welk chuckled. Must be nice to not need bandages. Tegani nodded. Indeed. Sergeant Welk. Is there a Sergeant Welk here? Shouted an officer as he walked down the line towards them. Welk stood up and waved at him. Over here, sir, he shouted. The officer hurried over to where the men were, and upon spotting Tegani, immediately realized he had the right group. The CO wanted me to get you on the next truck north. They heard how you handled the fighting down here and want to attach you to 3rd Battalion, 2nd ID. Apparently he feels that you would be of better use up there, said the officer. Can we finish bathing our lion first? Asked Welk. The officer looked at the blood and dirt stains on Tegani's overskin and nodded. Yes, but hurry. When you're done, report to Field HQ. They'll get you on the next truck headed north. Yes, sir, replied Welk. One of the soldiers looked at Welk and chuckled. Out of the frying pan and into the fire, he said. Welk frowned slightly, and then pointed to one of the other men. Since Dusty's gone, you're Tegani's combat partner now. Stick to him like glue and don't let him out of your sight until I say otherwise. Yes, Sergeant, replied the man. Tegani studied the young man briefly and then remembered Dusty. He remembered his smile, the dusty brown-colored hair that gave him his nickname, and the kindness that Dusty had displayed towards him. It was through his interaction with this young man that Tegani had learned the true meaning of friendship. It was now no longer just meaningless bits of data to him, but rather a tangible reality. He then slowly played back in his mind one memorable moment after another of their brief, but fruitful friendship as the men continued to wash him. A gentle knock came at Delgra's door. He ignored it at first, but then groaned as the knocking persisted. "Yes, what is it?" he muttered. "That's a fine greeting for a man who spent over 10 years risking his life for you," came a familiar voice. Delgra looked up in surprise to see O'Devian standing in the doorway in his dress uniform, grinning with joy like a Cheshire cat. "Well, this is a surprise." "What are you doing here?" asked Delgra. "You sound like you're not happy to see me." "No, just more surprised than anything." "I take it you orchestrated this visit?" O'Devian chuckled. "Oh, come now. As if you have to ask." Delgra laughed. "So how'd you do it?" "Well, it was really easy, actually. I just jumped onto the Milnet, grabbed one of your Marshal General personas, and put myself in for a transfer to your facility." Delgra furrowed his brow in surprise. "Well, I see your hacking skills haven't gotten rusty." O'Devian shook his head and grinned. "Not one bit. I made sure to keep them sharp while I was up north." "So, what made you suddenly want to rush down here and join me now?" "I would figure that you'd have come down here years ago if you had the ability." O'Devian shrugged. I figured I'd be more useful staying up there. So I worked in the background and helped you keep your actions hidden." "Well, at least for the first 2 years anyways, until some knucklehead in the Senate blew our cover." Delgra rolled his eyes and then took notice of another man who was standing in the doorway. "Who are you?" he asked. A tall, thin, slightly built young officer stepped through the door and saluted him. "Lieutenant Mestra, sir, it's a pleasure to meet you." Delgra studied the man with muted suspicion. "So why are you in my facility?" he asked flatly. Mestra pulled a folded sheet of paper from a pocket on his dress uniform and handed it to Delgra. The major read it and then handed it back to the lieutenant. "Logistics, said Delgra as he raised an eyebrow in interest. "Yes, sir, one of the best in the field too." Indeed," said Delgra reservedly. He then leaned over to O'Devian and whispered, "Can we trust him?" O'Devian nodded. "I had a look at his credentials on the way here. He checks out, so I wouldn't worry too much about him." Mestra raised an eyebrow in surprise as he listened to the whispered conversation. "You spied on me?" he asked. "You heard that?" asked Delgra. Mestra nodded. "Yes, sir, every bit of it. I'm not one of the best logistics officers for nothing." Delgra frowned slightly. "I can see why." Mestra nodded towards O'Devian and asked, "So why did you spy on me, Sergeant?" O'Devian shrugged. "I'm an intelligence specialist. It's my job to know things. Besides, you didn't think I'd just let you waltz in here without first knowing at least something about you." Mestra smirked slightly. "Apparently not." "Well then, I'm sure you'll want a tour of the facility now that you're here," said Delgra. "Yes, sir, and if it's not too much to ask, I'd also like to meet this robotic lion I've heard so much about," said Mestra. Delgra shook his head. "That'll be a problem. Tegani is out on the front lines right now, so you won't be able to meet him anytime soon. But I can introduce you to the scientist who created him, and have him show you the new prototypes he's working on. They should give you a good idea of what Tegani's like." "Tegani? Who's that?" "He's the robotic lion you're referring to. He's Dr. Bergen's first, and the prototype for the entire series." "Fascinating. You'll have to tell me more about this." Delgra motioned to the door. "Follow me and I can personally introduce both of you to the doctor. He can then explain his entire project to you from there." Tegani steadied himself as best he could as the truck they were riding in bounced roughly across the uneven ground near the northern HQ. As soon as the truck stopped, he leapt out and studied the area around them. Several soldiers standing nearby stared nervously at him as the rest of his squad climbed out of the truck behind him. "You're supposed to wait for us to at least open the gate," chided one of the men, patting Tegani on the neck as he walked by. "I am sorry. I will wait next time," replied Tegani. "Oh, don't listen to him. He's just giving you a hard time," said another soldier. Welk walked over to the HQ tent and said, "Stay here. I'll get our orders." He then walked inside, stopped, and said, "Sergeant Welk reporting as requested." Two older men, a general and a colonel, stood next to a table studying a large map that lay spread out before them. They both looked up and studied him briefly. "We're busy right now, Sergeant. So you'll need to come back later. I am the command sergeant of the 1st Cybernetic Expeditionary Squad. Our orders were to report to you as soon as possible." "We're here as ordered and have the lion with us," replied Welk. The two men stared briefly at each other and then back to Welk. "Well, don't just stand there, bring him in," said the general. Welk nodded and then slipped out of the tent briefly before appearing again with Tegani by his side a moment later. The two men studied the lion with interest. "So this is the famous robot that we've been hearing so much about. He's incredibly lifelike." "How intelligent is he?" asked the colonel. "Are you referring to my processing capacity, or total stored knowledge, sir?" asked Tegani. The two men marveled at this. "I guess that would answer my question." "Gentlemen, we have a task for you," said the general. He pointed towards a spot on the map and tapped it briefly. "The Gorg are giving us fits along this hill here. Their attack has momentum, and it's straining our lines. I need you and your lion to go in there and cause as much trouble as possible. This will be a hit-and-run mission, so move in, hit hard and fast, and then get out of there as quickly as you can. If we can stop their momentum, our lines should hold until we can bring more reinforcements into play. But if they break here, we'll be forced to fall all the way back to Lewis before we'll have another defensible position. That's 50 miles of advance I'd rather not hand to the Gorg if I can help it." "Are you sure a squad of our size can handle something like this?" asked Welk. "It's just a hit-and-run mission, Sergeant. It's not like you're battling the entire Gorg army. So it should be easy enough." "All right then, we'll get right on it," said Welk. He and Tegani then turned and left the tent. "So what's the good news?" asked Sims as they soon approached the others. "We've been ordered to do a hit-and-run mission. We're to go in against a nearby Gorg battalion, shake them up, and then run like mad," said Welk. Sims rolled his eyes. "In other words, we walk in, get shot up, and then, if there's anyone left, retreat and return to base. Just wonderful. And here I thought I might actually make it out of this war alive," he said sarcastically. "Trust me. I don't like this any more than you do. But if we do this right, everything should go well enough," said Welk. Sims grunted. "Define well." Welk frowned. "Trust me, I know what you're feeling. But I still think we can pull this off. I mean, we've got Tegani after all." "I am not invincible," replied Tegani flatly. "Yeah, listen to the lion," said one of the soldiers. "Shut up, Private," said Welk. "Actually, the lion's got a point. We're not invincible," said Sims. Welk bit his lip as he thought about this. "I know that, but, well, all right. Let's go have a look, and if it's too much, we'll pull back and get a second opinion. Is that good enough for you?" Sims nodded. "Works for me. All right then, let's move out." The squad quickly made their way down the Yigzin lines until they found themselves in a small grove of bushes just a stone's throw away from a nearby Gorg position. They could see round after round of artillery, combined with staggered attacks by armored vehicles and infantry, breaking like waves against a line of Yigzin bunkers that sat perched atop a small hill. Despite their formidable position, the bunkers were woefully undermanned. Welk pointed to a section of the Gorg lines, and said, "That's our objective." Sims whistled in amazement. "Wow, Command really gave us a doozy. You sure we can do this?" "That certainly doesn't look like anything we can engage without getting wiped out," he said. Welk mulled it over for a moment, and then said, "There has to be a way to shake these guys up, and that's all we really need to do. So if you've got some ideas, I'm open to suggestions." Suddenly Tegani heard something approaching them from behind. He turned to Welk, and whispered, "Something's coming."